This video is sponsored by Surfshark. On November 15th, word started making the rounds that Kathleen Kennedy's contract as head of Lucasfilm has reportedly been extended. For viewers of this channel, this should come as no surprise. We've been saying for years that she would be staying until the end of her contract. And as early on August 21st, we were the very first outlet to report Mikey Sutton of Geekosity's fame's exclusive scoop that a renewal of that contract was on the cards. And now, almost 3 months later, there are indications to suggest that Sutton's scoop indeed may have come to pass. Note the emphasis on may have, though, for at the time of the making of this video, none of the trades are confirming it. Regardless, we will in this video begin by going through the other piece of Star Wars news, namely Patty Jenkins Rogue Squadron being pushed back indefinitely, before breaking down the Kathleen Kennedy situation and what a renewal might entail. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we've already seen numerous people throw their hands up in disbelief and declare that if Kathleen Kennedy stays, they'll walk away. Not just from Star Wars, but all things Disney, including Marvel. Because why keep supporting a company that is so hostile to consumers with your hard-earned cash? Hence, loads of people are planning on canceling their Disney Plus subscriptions over this and take to the high seas instead. Please note that this is something neither Midnight's Edge, our sponsors, nor any other affiliates condones. Not only is piracy wrong, but you'd be exposing yourselves to endless spyware, tracking software, and other malware out there on the high seas. And that's on top of all the data that is stolen from you during all of your regular browsing. Well, modern problems require modern solutions, and many of them can be found in a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel's sponsor, Surfshark. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which guarantees instant online safety and encrypts all data sent via the internet. On top of that, Surfshark allows you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which also gives you access to 15 different Netflix libraries by simply changing your virtual location. Not only that, outside of the US, Star, the international version of Hulu, comes bundled with Disney Plus. If you're in the US and change your location to, say, the UK, well, then you just might get that too. One of the advantages with Surfshark over many other VPN providers is that it allows one account to be used on unlimited devices. That's part of the reason why Surfshark is the VPN of our choice, and it gets even better. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive offer in which you now get 83% off the normal list price, plus 4 extra months for free. That's right. In a time-limited Black Friday deal, you now get 4 extra months for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Do check out the link in the description below for further details and to order. With that, let's begin with the whole Patty Jenkins situation. In December of 2020, Kathleen Kennedy proudly announced that Lucasfilm would be releasing Rogue Squadron 2 years later, in December of 2023. Patty Jenkins would write and direct, which would make her the first female director to helm a Star Wars movie. The news was met with much excitement because Patty Jenkins was perceived as a great filmmaker who could do no wrong. But again, note the emphasis on was perceived in the past tense, for that perception ended just 2 weeks after the Rogue Squadron announcement took place. That's when the world got to see Wonder Woman 84 on HBO Max, a movie that showcased Patty Jenkins' talent not just as a director, but also as a writer.
What the hell was that?
Excitement for Rogue Squadron took something of a tumble after that. Then we didn't really hear much about the movie until November 8th of this year, when The Hollywood Reporter broke the scoop that Rogue Squadron had been taken off the production schedule due to scheduling conflicts. The scoop said it was hoped that once Jenkins fulfilled her previous commitments, she would be able to return to the project. Now, here it should be noted that The Hollywood Reporter is a studio mouthpiece, and it'll put out the message the studio wants to put out. In this case, the message they wanted to put out was that Patty Jenkins was such a hot and in-demand director that they only now noticed that she had been double booked for the shoot that was supposed to begin in the next few weeks. Hence, they had no choice but to take Rogue Squadron off the calendar, but just for now, only until her schedule clears. This is spin. The reality of the situation is that Rogue Squadron is dead in the water and will never happen. That is too embarrassing an admission to make though, which is why they instead say they'll temporarily take it off the schedule. Rationale being that you'll eventually forget all about it and not notice that the movie will not be returned to the schedule. More detail was revealed from Matthew Bologna's publication Puck, who revealed that it was really all about creative differences. More specifically, the powers that be at Lucasfilm, here represented not by Kathleen Kennedy, but by Michelle Rejwan, that couldn't agree with Patty Jenkins on the details of the story. Take note of that, because we'll be back to the significance of Michelle Rejwan being left out to dry later. In general, some are of the opinion that Patty Jenkins is not a storyteller, as evidenced by Wonder Woman 84, So some may argue that Lucasfilm are only trying to give her notes in order to preclude her script from being an unmitigated disaster, and Jenkins does not take kindly to those notes. Others claim that her script is just fine, but that she can't work with many cooks in the Lucasfilm committee whose track record is fairly spotty. Often the truth is somewhere in the middle, but in this case, both positions are probably correct. In either event, don't expect to see Patty Jenkins return to Star Wars soon. In the exact same article, however, Matthew Bologna also claimed that Kathleen Kennedy wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, as her contract, according to him, has been renewed for 3 years, up to 2024. To keep the timeline straight, on August 21st, we first disseminated Sutton's scoop that Kennedy's contract was due to be renewed. On November 15th, Matthew Bologna reported the renewal had happened. This is where one should ask, who on earth is Matthew Bologna, and how has he come by all of this information? While visiting our tri-weekly live show, Midnight's Edge in the Morning, writer and producer Kamran Pasha provided the answer to that.
Matthew Bologna was an editor at The Hollywood Reporter who was fired about a year and a half ago. What I'd heard at the time, was that he confronted some of his bosses who owned the paper, that he didn't like the editorial directions he was getting, which is one of those rare moments where you look behind the curtain and you realize these people are being given editorial directions, right? What I heard was that, and this is not anywhere in the trade, it's just rumors that I heard that I believe, is that The Hollywood Reporter had now decided to differentiate itself from Variety and Deadline, which are owned by its competing company, Penske Media. And Variety and Deadline, as we talked about, are largely spokespeople for the club being the public face of Hollywood, the famous celebrities, people like Bob Iger who love the limelight. That's the club, right? Whereas Hollywood Reporter decided, all right, in order to differentiate ourselves, we're going to support the behind the scenes power players of Hollywood, right? And whatever disagreement Mr. Bologna had about that direction or what they were going to do, I think it played out initially in a form that I didn't like, which is The Hollywood Reporter largely took the side of a certain ex-wife of
Pirate Guy,
because she was in a relationship with one of those powerful players, wealthy people behind the scenes, right? And so they took that side and went after
Pirate Guy
in a really disgraceful way, in my opinion. But they've also then taken the side of Bob Chapek. So it is very interesting that this news or this information has been only apparently coming out through Puck, which is a media outlet I was not familiar with. I wasn't even aware of what Mr. Bologna was doing after he left The Hollywood Reporter. No one in the industry, to my knowledge, has ever talked about this thing. So it was like, for it to come out here means it was a strategic plant. The question is, who planted it?
In other words, Matthew Bologna is a former editor of The Hollywood Reporter who left the publication after the owners decided to shift their allegiance away from the Hollywood royalty, like Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy, and towards the power players and major investors behind the scenes, whose names and faces are often unknown to the public at large. This is incidentally why Bob Chapek has gotten more positive press in The Hollywood Reporter than the other two. As in trying to make Disney a for-profit company again, he is serving the same masters as The Hollywood Reporter. Be that as it may, due to having been the editor of The Hollywood Reporter when they still serve the club of Hollywood royalty, Bologna will still have connections to that club and be fed information they want to leak, such as a Kathleen Kennedy renewal. And it wouldn't be the first time something like that leaked. The last time Kathleen Kennedy's contract was renewed was in the fall of 2018. This happened in the aftermath of Solo, a Star Wars story, flopping, and amid the fallout from The Last Jedi still cascading. Bob Iger knew already that Kathleen Kennedy was positively radioactive with a built-in audience, but since the option of not renewing her wasn't on his table, he opted for a renewal in silence and without fanfare, while Favreau was working on a new direction. Hence, Disney never made any kind of official announcement that Kathleen Kennedy's contract had been renewed. Instead, Kathleen Kennedy's camp had to leak it themselves, which is why her renewal was made known in a Hollywood Reporter exclusive, in which the publication, quote, had learned from implied sources that Kathleen Kennedy's contract had been extended up to 2021. Disney never commented on or verified the scoop, but its veracity was never questioned, since a leak to The Hollywood Reporter usually is every bit as real as an official announcement. Even so, Disney's silence on the matter was tremendously embarrassing for Kathleen Kennedy, as she was on the receiving end of a barrage of hate from a fan base scorned, and she never got the kind of public show of support from Disney. That was embarrassing in 2018, but the manner in which the current renewal was made known is infinitely much worse. While Kathleen Kennedy had to leak the previous contract extension herself, the write-up in Deadline Hollywood, at the very least, was glowingly positive in its description of her. By contrast, Matthew Bologna's write-up in Puck is harshly critical of her. The title of the piece is, after all, "It's Time to Take Star Wars Movies Away from Kathy Kennedy," and it proceeds to detail how badly she mismanaged Star Wars on film, and with good reason. While the movies put out on Kennedy's watch were for the most part billion-dollar movies, they were supposed to have been $2 billion movies. And the only real success on her watch has been The Mandalorian. And while she does get credit for it courtesy of her position, it can be questioned whether or not that is really deserved. The Puck piece concludes by stating, "After nearly a decade in charge, it seems clear Kennedy isn't that person, and doesn't have that team in place for Star Wars to thrive as a film franchise. Kennedy has a lot of good things happening at Lucasfilm, and I'm told she recently re-upped her deal for another 3 years. She's a producing legend and up there with the best who have ever done it. But Star Wars as a film franchise is a disaster, and someone else should be given a chance to fix it." The closest thing we have to confirmation of the Puck scoop comes from Frank Marshall, producer extraordinaire and Kathleen Kennedy's husband, who retweeted a quote referring to Kathleen Kennedy's renewal, but conveniently removing Bologna's criticism of that renewal. In confirming that part of the scoop, however, Frank Marshall tacitly also confirmed everything else, as well as implying where Bologna might have come by the information in the first place. Matthew Bologna's Puck article consists of 3 core elements. First is the leak from inside sources that Patty Jenkins left over creative differences from primarily Michelle Ridgwan. Last is the leak from inside sources that Kathleen Kennedy's contract had been renewed. And in between the two, Bologna himself interjects how badly Kathy had screwed up Star Wars. That is Bologna's opinion, and it colors the entire piece. But the 2 leaks were actually favorable to Kathleen Kennedy, as one absolved her of blame in the Rogue Squadron situation, and the other says she's renewed, usually a vote of confidence. This heavily suggests that, like last time, Kathleen Kennedy's camp is behind this leak. But how could it backfire on them so badly? Kamran Pasha, himself a former journalist, had some thoughts on how this could have happened.
My instinct is that Miss Kennedy couldn't get this information out. She wanted to get this information out. The trades had shut it down. And so she went through her Rolodex and said, hey, remember that Bologna guy? I think I talked to him once or twice. At that level, he was a high-level editor at the Hollywood Reporter. I'm sure he had lunch with her at some point, sure their paths crossed. So she had his number or email or whatever. So she reached out to him and said, just want to let you know this, or had someone proxy reach out. What she couldn't control is how he wrote that up, because he's not a trade. He's doing his own thing. And he's trying to, from a pure business point of view, he's trying to bring attention to Puck, right? I'd never heard of it. Now I've heard of it. Now we're all talking about it, right? I'm sure people are going to that site. I'm sure it's got subscribers that weren't there before this incident. So if I were a Machiavellian dude trying to make it on my own, I would take the intel that I was given and put my own passionate spin on it, which she couldn't control because it's not a trade. They can control the trades, right? This is a guy trying to make his bones and trying to get back in the game that he was kicked out of. So it makes sense for him. There was the reason I think that is that Deadline used to be what I'm claiming that Puck is trying to do here. Deadline under Nikki Fink used to be the muckraking, however you say it, website where Nikki Fink would put her passionate opinions out there and would call out people in the industry. And it was the place where we all went to for gossip. And, it wasn't a propaganda trade. It was then purchased by Penske, who pushed her out. He purchased it, put her on NDA on her. She actually tried to do some of her muckraking again, and he literally locked her out of her own website and told her it's not what our contract says. This is now going to be an official trade like Variety is, like the other company I own, right? And so it may be that this gentleman, Mr. Bologna, is attempting to become the new Nikki Fink, the guy who's got the inside information, who can put his passionate spin on things. And I think it's worked because people now know he exists. And I've been saying for some time, I wish there was another Nikki Fink. With Nikki, you would leak things to Nikki and you never knew what was going to happen. You would never knew if she was going to take your side in the leak. That's what made her such an entertaining reporter and a real reporter, right? So maybe Mr. Bologna is attempting to be the new Nikki Fink. That is my theory on what's happening here.
Bob Chapek's strategy for Disney is an end to long-term contracts, such as the one Kathleen Kennedy was just awarded, which suggests that her contract is not the standard fare. Likewise, Edward Lauder at Small Screen had intel from a source that reported to him that Kathleen Kennedy will be at Lucasfilm for the foreseeable future, explaining that, quote, the contract might have been officially extended until 2024, but it seems as though the ball's very much in Kennedy's court regarding how long she stays as Lucasfilm's president. This again suggests that this is no normal contract, but something unique to her. No other executive gets contracts that allow them to stay until they decide they no longer want to. If indeed Kennedy has been given such a contract, it is not in recognition of her talent or how much money she has made the company, because she hasn't, but as a face-saving measure for someone who otherwise might burn the Magic Castle down on their way out the door. We've also learned some more information from our own sources, though here we must first recommend you take everything with a grain of salt and treat as rumor, as none of this can be independently verified. What we have consistently heard is that Kathleen Kennedy's position is increasingly ceremonial. Creative influence over Star Wars has been mostly deferred to Jon Favreau, certainly where the Disney Plus shows are concerned, while her own projects are all facing various difficulties, which could preclude most or all of them from ever seeing the light of day. She used to have full creative control over Indiana Jones, but while she retains influence over it, she lost that control when it was decided to push the movie back a year in order to retool it, as we've already covered. It's been opined to us that the only reason Kathleen Kennedy hasn't left yet, despite the increasing narrative even within Hollywood that she screwed up Star Wars, is that she has nowhere left to go that could be seen as a step up, and to leave now would mean cementing the impression that when she got a studio to run, she blew it. Better than to wait until others have gotten further in cleaning up her mess, so she can leave while claiming credit for their work in brand management. We've also heard from separate sources. One reason could be a stipulation from the original contracts when Disney bought Lucasfilm, and Lucas sealed the fate himself by giving Kennedy a lifetime contract of sorts. Or that the contract gave her first right to refusal since the main Star Wars trilogy managed to make $1 billion each, even if just like The Rise of Skywalker. The irony facing Disney here is that even if her role may be mostly ceremonial at this point, her continued presence alone will prevent lapsed fans from returning to the Star Wars fold, which threatens to undercut everything Jon Favreau is doing in the upcoming Book of Boba Fett and beyond. Let us know how a Kathleen Kennedy renewal affects your excitement for the future of Star Wars in the comments. And remember that to help protect your data, bypass quarrelsome geo-blocking restrictions, and more, you should get Surfshark VPN. Use our code MIDNIGHT to get 83% off plus 4 extra months for free. Link is in the description.